I should go plug my laptop. Hey, Sable. There it is. Hey, DK. Oh, nope. Got it. Not much. Have a light headache. He's okay from what I know. She's fine for right now. That's all I know. I've already gotten some water, DK. ITNS. No, it's on. No. Oh, I was only on my own page. Okay. Alright. I guess I'll put some more Fallout 3. I am trying not to puke right now. Yeah. Biff. Start memory unit. Continue more where I left off. Nah. I'm in the mood of talking and streaming right now, so. Well, I say talking, but most of my streams just end up me not talking, and instead just be playing Fallout, ignoring the stream, which I need to get out of that habit. But yeah, also got nothing better to do. I left my computer mouse back at my dad's again, so I can't play Hoi 4 or Terry on my laptop or any other game. I don't feel like chatting on Nightcore right now. So. Alright, bye, DK. Question, what do I do now? How do I go up to the northeast? Suicide, but yeah. Worth the risk. Freedom. Plus, it's good to stay up to date without people talking. I don't feel like writing in my book right now. And I don't feel like sleeping. So, fuck. Dark. Motherfucker. Xbox is being right now.
It's very Jimmy's house of horrors, only to find another corpse in the form of Tony. Dead body somehow standing upright outside that door with a knife in his back. I always think it's kind of dumb when horror movies have bodies act like haunted house props. But maybe Michael was just holding the body up himself, because don't look now, but oh Lord, he coming. He rearms himself with a knife right as some cops arrive outside, and even though Marion fights back with a fire poker, she's unable to get the attention of the cops who are checking out her house next door, despite her most valiant efforts. Ouch! A throat slit takes out a legacy Halloween character, but at least she was a fighter to the end. And let's be real, if Michael hadn't gotten her, all those cigarettes probably would have eventually anyway. To add insult to injury, Michael once again steals Marion Chambers' car to make his escape. The crime scene is investigated by Detective Exposition, who says that Dr. Loomis had actually lived in this house under Marion's care until his natural death some time ago. They go into Loomis's old office, which is full of stuff he had been collecting ever since Michael Myers' body disappeared during the hospital fire 20 years ago. Speaking of which, now's a good time for a title card. 20 years later. An opening credits sequence plays out over B-roll of all the stuff in Loomis's study, as voice actor Tom Kane recites Donald Pleasance's speech about Michael Myers from the first film.
I met this 6-year-old child with the blackest eyes. Devil eyes.
He does a pretty decent Loomis, and fun fact, Tom Kane also played Darwin in The Wild Thornberrys alongside Danielle Harris, who voiced older sister Deborah. The more you know. Let's get out of Langdon and head home to Summer Glen, California, to the Hillcrest Academy High School, where it's everyone's favorite holiday, Halloween! Laurie Strode has moved here and is living under the alias Carrie Tate with her 17-year-old son John, played by introducing Josh Hartnett. Although they both seem like pretty cool people, they butt heads because she's overprotective, especially around this time of year. Probably because she keeps having visions of Michael all the time. Because of her paranoia, she's not letting John go on a school trip to Yosemite with the rest of his classmates that weekend. But lucky for him, various factors have made it so his girlfriend Molly, played by Michelle Williams, and their friends Sarah and Charlie aren't going either. So they'll all be staying back on campus together.
What place would be antique? We'd have the run of it. Could have a roaming orgy.
I love the way this man thinks.
As head mistress of this expensive-ass boarding school, Carrie Tate tells the rest of the student body to behave themselves in Yosemite, no panky, hanky, or otherwise, before sneaking into her office to make out with Alan Arkin's son. Adam Arkin first Will, the school's guidance counselor, but his counseling is the only thing Laurie's been guided, if you get my meaning. Later on, they have a lunch date in town where she's unable to bring herself to tell him about her Haddonfield history. Oh well, if you can't get over your tragic past, might as well chug, chug, chug. Keeping Laurie's staff and students safe at Hillcrest is security guard Ronnie, played by LL Cool J, and he's also an aspiring smut writer.
Lead to tumultuous, round melon breasts.
Round melon. What?
Yeah, his wife's not exactly the biggest fan. He's got to be better at slash fiction than security guarding, though, since he agrees to let John and Charlie sneak off campus so they can plan a romantic weekend with their lady. Why you ain't following those LL rules, Jay? In town, John and his high school me-looking friend shoplift a bottle of booze from a nearby liquor store, way to hurt the local economy, youths. And on their way back to Hillcrest, they get cornered by Lori, who yells at them because they're not supposed to be off campus at all. And on Halloween Day, Laurie Strode ain't got no chill.
What the fuck do you think you're doing?
John yells back at her and tells her that Michael Myers is dead. Get the fuck over it, Mom. But sadly, John doesn't know how wrong he is. We check back in on Michael in Northern California, where a mom is taking her daughter to a rest stop to pee. Functionally, this scene is just here so Michael can trade Marion Chambers' messed up ride for this lady's weirdly old-fashioned whip. But stylistically, it's a really good scene of tension and suspense, especially the way it uses the mother's point of view and how fearful she is for her daughter as a scary stranger steals her purse. I think it's a great example of why H2O is a solid sequel, even if you're not a fan of the Kevin Williamson-like dialogue. Michael drives that shitty rust bucket to Hillcrest to scope out the security sitch, and that sucks for Laurie, because even someone with two eyes shot out could see that Ronnie is just an LL Fool J. Don't worry, Ronnie, that verbal flogging you're getting is totally worth it in the name of love, because you helped Big John set up the perfect basement date for Molly. This place looks like somewhere I'd play poker in high school. I'd take my girlfriend to get a hand, but whatever works, I guess. As Laura Carey teaches her class about Frankenstein, Molly repeats a beat from the original when she sees Michael out the window. When Laurie calls on her and breaks Molly's concentration, she's still able to do the final girl thing and answer the question correctly, delivering a thematic message about confronting the monster that leaves her teacher frozen still until the bell rings. As the other students leave, Laurie thinks that she's doing her son a favor when she calls him over and gives him a permission slip for the Yosemite trip. But it's too late for good parenting, Care Bear. This kid's got a roaming orgy plan. An updated version of the classic theme plays as all the other Hillcrest kids board their school buses and leave campus for their Yosemite trip. And now the place is good and underpopulated for the slasher ahead. Before we get to the night's affairs, though, we've got to have a metatextual moment with Laurie's secretary Norma, played by her real-life mom, Janet Leigh.
If I could be maternal for a moment.
For extra fun, the scene even starts with a quote from the original Halloween.
It's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare.
Janet Leigh, of course, played the infamous psycho shower victim, Marion Crane, who, yes, the nurse from these movies was named after. Horror is a very incestuous genre. Norma wishes Carrie well and then heads off to trade in her Ford mainline as echoes of the Psycho score play.
Oh, Miss Tate, happy Halloween.
Sure, it's super meta, but I enjoyed this scene as an homage to one of the greats. That night, Ronnie finds Michael's stolen truck smoking outside the school gates, and since this is a smoke-free campus, he can't help but take a closer look. While he's inside the vehicle, though, a real LL Ghoul J sneaks behind him, and now the campus's security has officially been breached. I like this movie, but that was a real dumb character moment, and the only purpose was to get Michael inside the school. Pretty lazy. In any case, he's there now, and Laurie sees him as she's closing up shop for the night. We get one of those ambiguous, was that just an illusion or was he really there moments when Will ends up running into Laurie instead, but after she leaves, Will does in fact spot Michael over there. So yeah, he's definitely walking around. And now if you'll excuse me, I'd like to nitpick like a real big nerd. Consider this scene.
Do you want to die tonight, Cece?
Yes, that's a clip from Scream 2. Seems like a fine thing for these high school girls to be watching, right? But wait a minute, what if they had done a double feature that night and watched the original Scream before the sequel? You know what they would have seen?
Watch out, Jamie. You know he's around.
Jim, look behind you. Behind you. Jamie, turn around.
Oh! Yeah, dude, they would have seen Malibu's Most Wanted watching a scene with her headmistress. It's still canon in this timeline. That don't make sense. Again, it's nitpicky, but it also, blows up the fabric of space-time in this universe, so it's always bugged me a little bit. Whatever, though. That's actually not even the craziest thing in this scene, because it has this exchange.
Try to join us.
I can't. I'm having my nipples pierced.
Oh.
I know the humor of this movie doesn't work for everyone, but I think the actors sell these lines enough for me to enjoy it. The teens are having a real fire hazardous evening together, with a romantic meal to get them in the mood consisting of school cafeteria leftovers. Meanwhile, Laurie and Will skip the foreplay and get straight to lip smacking. Laurie puts the lovemaking on hold to finally tell Will about her past, and here we get some lines that I'm not such a big fan of.
My brother killed my sister when she was 17.
Well, that's
Sucky.
Yo, dude, take her seriously. She's got her serious face on. He does eventually, and when he asks how old she was when everything went down, Lori freaks out because she realizes that she was the same age then that John is now. In his bedroom, she finds his Yosemite bag as evidence that he never actually left campus, and that's enough cause for her to pull out a Loomis-style handgun from under her pillow and spring into action. Charlie and Sarah are having a real Crispin Glover problem tonight. They've got a bottle of booze but no corkscrew. A fast thinker, Charlie hops into the dumbwaiter to go to the upstairs kitchen and look for one there. It's like an updated version of Part 5's laundry chute mechanic. I like it, but before Charlie can yell, Dad, where the hell's the corkscrew? A shape appears behind him, and sadly this shape has a CGI mask? What? Yeah, dude, it had to do with reshoots and shit, but wow, he looks like he wandered out of a scanner darkly. Cell-shaded or not, Mike still manages to kill Charlie, since Sarah finds his corpse in the dumbwaiter with his throat slit pretty friggin' deep there, obviously done with a jagged corkscrew instead of your standard chef's knife.
A stadium powered with solar.
Amazing. Never gonna happen.
A personal computer.
Michael appears in a doorway, and in an effort to escape him, Sarah snuggles up to her dead boyfriend and rides the dumbwaiter up, giving Michael the chance to repeat a shot from Part 5. As she's climbing out upstairs, though, Michael cuts the pulley system out from the dumbwaiter, causing it to fall and crush her leg, just snapping that boy real bad. Quick thinking there, Mike. With her movement marred, Sarah's unable to crawl away from Michael when he comes upstairs, and he kills her as she pleads for her life with at least 4 stabs to the back using his standard murder knife. Although the kill is mostly off-screen, we do get to see a body shortly when John and Molly open the pantry to find Sarah's corpse strung up like Casey Becker, her insides on the outside. John and Molly look over to see Michael doing his head tilt thing, so they get the heck out of there. But Michael catches up and almost hits Molly with his knife before John stops him. For that white knighting, John gets a knife in the leg, but Molly stops Michael with a rock, and the teen lovers manage to get away, of course without bothering to double tap the guy trying to kill them. As in many Halloween films, they find themselves stuck behind a locked door as the shape approaches. Michael slashes at them through a gate for a while before grabbing the keys Molly dropped to get inside. But before he can find the right one, John and Molly are saved by Lori, who shares an iconic shot with Michael through this porthole window. I mean, this shit was literally in every trailer. It's the definitive shot of this movie. But as she's getting her gun out to kill him, Michael plays an old standard and disappears from sight. Lori puts her son and his girlfriend in a closet and tells them sternly to stay put.
Do as I say now.
Sounds like a plan, Lori, but too bad you've got Trigger Happy Will with you to take your gun away and shoot at what he thinks to be the shape. Turns out it was just Ronnie, though. You're lucky this ain't the age of social media, Will, or else your ass would be a hashtag right now. But instead of hash, his ass is grass. And here comes Lawnmower Michael to stab Will in the back with his knife. Michael kills Will by lifting him up off the ground as Lori runs away, kind of echoing the Part 2 Nurse Karen kill. Man, Michael's got fewer moves to him than a friggin' Soul Calibur character. Lori gets the kids and they all run off, as Michael does what Michael does, slowly chasing after them. The ladies load the injured John into an SUV as Michael stalks after them in a scene where his mask keeps alternating between the 2 different versions they use during shoots. They manage to get away, but when they reach the gate, Lori tells the kids to carry on without her, while quoting even more dialogue from the original.
I want you to drive down the street to the Beckers, the mile down the road. Tell them to call an ambulance and get the police. No, we're not leaving. Do as I say now.
You already referenced that line, though. Like, we get it. The original had a bunch of dialogue we all know.
Do you need something, Katie, or I should say need? Assuming you need or want to say something or tell me something. Or just here to just sit back and relax. Either one, I could care less.
Just a word to my wasteland friends out there. Stay safe, stay healthy, and above all, stay happy.
Well, I'm guessing it. Katie didn't want to say anything, just say my name. Just work. What is it with people working today? Nope, she just said my name and I left.
They say recent events have made the world seem like a better place. I hope all of you out there can smile and feel better knowing that it's true. I'm dedicating this next piece of music to my loving husband. May your soul find peace. That song reminded me how wonderful these composers were. How delightful to have such an amazing imagination.
Colin, she's been gone for a while now.
This next piece is dedicated to my old friend Crazy Wolf Dog. No one can scour the wasteland and find such oddities as you.
Because yesterday I was sick. I had a big, major fucking headache.
Music has always been an important part of my life. I hope you enjoy listening to these
It's not even mentioning school.
I enjoy playing them.
I do have a life I need to attend to occasionally. Can't stream all the time. I stream when I can, or if I want to. I do streams for fun, or just in case of emergency. Fuck.
everyone's head on a fucking plate. Oh.
This next selection was one of my mother's favorites. I hope you'll enjoy hearing it as much as I enjoyed playing it. This next piece reminds me of something my husband said. Friendship is like a violin. Even if the music stops, you'll still have the strings.
Welcome back, Katie. Did you need something earlier? Oh, boo-hoo. End of the world.
This next piece is dedicated to my old friend Crazy Wolf Dog. No one can scour the wasteland and find such oddities as you.
Damn it. Make sure I play something that doesn't fall out. I get sick and tired of it. Mother.
This is for all those people out there who take the time to help out those in need. And the joy of the music, you
Quickly. Oops. Fuck! Damn it! Stop playing the game.
Pick them up and give them to me if you don't want to put them back on. Go ahead.
Ah, it's nasty.
Right back.
Every last bit of it regurgitated. Regardless of her repetition, the kids do as she says, and they leave Lori alone on campus so she can axe herself up like a boy going to his first middle school dance. With our final act all set up, Lori heads back to the school to confront her murderous brother. Michael eventually shows up with a real sweet negative one-armed pull-up to get behind Lori so they can have a slash-off. We'll call round 1 a draw, but Lori takes round 2 with a flagpole to the chest. Round 3 is in the kitchen, where Lori misses a bunch of knife tosses at Michael, but successfully defends against his own retaliatory strike. We are deep in Final Girl Circuit territory at this point, and you all know the words to this song. The cool thing here is just how much of a fighter Lori is, as she eventually stabs Michael a ton of times in the chest and knocks him over a second-story balcony to crash through a table below. Unfortunately, when she goes down there to finish him off for good, she's interrupted by a still-living Ronnie who, survived a gunshot to the head? LL Cool J must have a damn good agent. Emergency vehicles show up, and Michael gets put in a body bag. But if you think that's the end of this, I've got a fucking bridge to sell you, because Lori's not leaving this one to the authorities and goes the full Sam Loomis in order to hijack the coroner's van and drive us to this movie's finale. As she speeds along the California highway, the body in the bag behind her starts coming back to life, just as she suspected. And after he gets out, he goes to attack her, but Lori slams on the brakes and sends the man in the mask flying out through the windshield. She waits for him to do the standard Michael Myers sit-up before revving up the van and imitating Rachel's Part 4 attempt at vehicular homicide. So many references! The stunt sends both of them and the van all tumbling down the hill together, with the Shape getting the short end of the stick when the van smashes him against a fallen tree. Lori recovers as the van catches fire, but she knows better than to trust a fire to kill Michael Myers. Fool me once, you know? And so she grabs the fire axe and heads over to confront Michael. She finds him pawing at his mask in a weird way, and he even tries to reach out a hand towards her in an attempt to make peace or something. But that shit ain't gonna work on Lori fucking Strode, so after briefly ETing with him, she takes that axe and cuts his freaking head off! Yeah, wow! Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna count this as a half kill right now, and it'll make more sense next video, I promise. Like, it's definitely a kill, but there's further explanation to it, so just take my word right now. Needless to say, though, this was a shocking way to end the movie, and in my opinion, it would have made for an excellent end to the franchise. But like all good horror franchises, Halloween just didn't know when to quit. Always gotta be adding kills, you know? Let's see how many this entry added and get to the numbers. That's some good H2O. There were 6.5 kills in Halloween H2O, and I promise that'll make at least a little more sense next video. The victims included 4.5 dudes and 2 ladies, giving us this pretty standard pie chart, and with a runtime of 86 minutes, we wound up with a kill on average every 12.29 minutes. I'll give the golden chainsaw for coolest kill to Jimmy. Yeah, it was done off screen, but it was with an ice skate. That's something kind of new. Plus, who doesn't want to see Tommy Solomon with a skate in his snarky face? Dull machete for lamest kill will go to Jimmy's buddy Tony, because I hate that stupid corpse standing behind a door trope. Be better, horror movies. And that's it. Halloween H2O came out in 1998, 20 years after the original, and was the first Halloween sequel to make as much money as the original. That meant that Myers Fire was hot when they cooked up Resurrection, which I'll cover next week. Until then, I'm James A. Janice. This has been The Kill Count. Thanks a lot for watching this week's Kill Count. I want to thank a couple of patrons like Christopher Alden, Anthony Stamps, Monica Diaz, and Kobe. Man, I'm just so thirsty after recording that Kill Count. I can just... Whew. I gotta record another one of these right now. I'm gonna have to pee. Thanks, y'all. Pee good people. Pee good people.
Play She's a Rainbow.
She holds her head. She's like a rainbow.
The all-new Acura RDX ELS Studio 3D sound.
Welcome. Our prophets told of a savior who would arrive from another land and free our world from the grip of darkness. What is your birth name?
Chad. The Dark Lord Azrakam and his army of shadows has entombed our world in ice and snow.
Only you can defeat him, Chad.
Okay. We must inform the queen of your arrival.
No need. I felt his presence. I am Queen Chrysalis, ruler of Etheria and the 9 rivers, from Stog to Everseed.
Okay.
There was a time when these meadows bloomed, and there is hope they may bloom again, for today marks your coming.
Coming.
You are the savior of Etheria. So says the prophecy.
So says the prophecy!
Okay.
But you must undertake a dangerous journey. You may return to your world at any time if you desire. The choice is yours. But be warned.
He left.
What? Go.
My liege.
Yes.
Chad, why did you leave?
I was bored.
Can you come back for a moment? We weren't done.
Okay.
Thank you, Chad. You have chosen to follow your destiny.
First, you must climb the mountain of despair.
Okay.
Then ford the river of flame.
Okay.
And survive the forest of translucent transgressions.
And after the veil of evil is lifted, you will become king, and I will gift you with my virginity.
Dope.
After your journey.
Oh, okay.
To aid you on this quest, we give you these items.
From the Order of the Centauri, I present you with this map to guide you. Thousands of my kind died beyond the mountains to create it. May they rest with the gods.
Dwarves, I give you the crystal of Gumligin to light your path.
Gay.
From the elven sword of the great warrior Ashland.
Safe travels, young warrior. May the great gods bless you.
Okay.
That boy is our last hope.
I do not see a boy. I see a warrior.
Look.
It's like his sword is his penis. Very clever.
Okay.
I don't have a lot of time to tell you. If you switch to Liberty Mutual, you could save $782.
You've been chosen as a champion to represent your wizarding house in a deadly duel against 2 rival magic schools. Your opponents are fearsome. From the Newtnit School, a powerful sorcerer wields a wand that can turn people into fish, but his spell only works 70% of the time. And from the Leibton School, an even more powerful enchantress wields a wand that turns people to statues, and it works 90% of the time. Lots are drawn, and you're chosen to cast the first spell in the duel. The Newtnitz magician will go second, and the Leibton enchantress third, after which you'll repeat casting in that order until only one of you is left. The rules of magic duels are strict, and anyone who casts out of order immediately forfeits the duel. Also, to prevent draws, the rules stipulate that if everyone's still standing at the end of the first round, you'll all be turned into cats. Now you must choose a wand. Your wizarding house presents you with 3 options. The Banneker, which binds one target with vines and casts effectively 60% of the time. The Gaussian, which turns one target into a tree and works 80% of the time. And the incredibly rare Nerta 9000, which banishes one target to a distant mountaintop and casts perfectly 100% of the time. Your opponents are masters of strategy as well as sorcery, and you know they'll make the choices that maximize their own chances of success. Which wand should you choose, and what strategy should you employ to have the greatest chance of winning the duel? You reach for the Nerta 9000 first. After all, it makes sense to enter the duel with the most powerful wand. But before you pick it up, you consider what would happen. As the most dangerous wizard, you'd also be the target of the other two magicians. And you'd need to take care of the most dangerous of them first. But afterward, there's a 70% chance you'd be struck down by the remaining wizard. That's trouble. Maybe it's better to take the Gaussian. It works 80% of the time, which means you wouldn't be a target until the enchantress was incapacitated. But if you succeeded in transforming her, you'd probably be turned into a fish immediately after. If you transformed the sorcerer, the enchantress would almost certainly turn you to stone. It would really be better if you missed. And that's when you have an idea. What if you took the Gaussian, then missed on purpose? Then you would wait for the sorcerer to attack the enchantress, and you'd have an 80% chance of winning against the sorcerer. It's a good idea, but there's a problem. The sorcerer could also pass his turn, and the enchantress, knowing that she couldn't pass without becoming a cat, would cast her spell on one of you. And since you're the most dangerous between you and the sorcerer, you'd be the target. And that's when you see what you really need to do. Take the weakest wand, the Banneker, and miss on purpose. Now the sorcerer knows that he'll be targeted by the enchantress, and he'll have to try to turn her into a fish to avoid being turned into stone. 70% of the time, he'd succeed, and you'd have a 60% chance of winning the duel at the beginning of the next round. If he fails, chances are he'll be turned to stone, and you'd still have a 60% chance of winning the duel against the enchantress. There's a slim 3% chance you'll all be turned into cats, but when everything's accounted for, you have better than even odds of winning with this strategy, and that's the best you can do. Here's what the probability of winning for the different strategies looks like. Who would have thought that the best way to take your shot would be to throw away your shot? Hungry for more deadly duels? Try this one out. You and your opponent have to choose between 2 bowls of 5 apples each. In the green bowl, 2 of the apples are poisonous, and in the red bowl, 3 are. But if you choose the green bowl, you'll have to eat 3 of the apples at random. And if you choose the red bowl, you'll have to eat 2 at random. Here's the catch. Eat 1 poisonous apple and you'll be fine, but 2 will kill you. Which bowl should you choose? Or does it not even matter? Our sponsor, Brilliant.org, will help you develop the skills to survive any battle of wits life throws at you. They'll guide you on how to break down a problem into its component pieces, think clearly through each part, and build it back up to a conclusion. Hone your instincts at brilliant.org/TEDEd and use that link so they know we sent you. Better yet, the first 8...
You give us the fire, we'll give them hell.
Michael Myers is one of the scariest horror icons of all time. From normal-sized creep to hobo in a pro wrestler's body, let's start from the beginning. Michael first appears as a murderous blonde boy wearing a clown costume. He's sent to a mental institution, and 15 years later, he breaks out and dons the iconic blue jumpsuit and a Captain Kirk mask, painted white with dark hair. He goes on a bloody massacre and is then shot multiple times and falls off a balcony. In Halloween 2, taking place within the same night, Michael Myers is somehow stockier. His mask is yellowed and now has reddish hair. He sets out to kill the surviving victim from the last film, who happens to be his sister. She shoots him in the eyes, and he's set on fire. Michael does not appear in Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. So, on to the next film. In Return of Michael Myers, Michael awakens from a coma covered in bandages. He's taller, bulkier, and finds a greasy blue jumpsuit and a new mask to wear. Then features a shocked expression and slicked orangish hair that briefly turns blonde. After learning of his sister's death, he instead hunts his niece, but is shot and falls down a well. In The Revenge of Michael Myers, he is nursed back to health by a hermit. His mask is elongated with hair that's grown out. Once again, he searches for his niece, but he's put in jail and breaks out soon after. The Curse of Michael Myers features a more classic-looking mask. His jumpsuit has also been slightly updated. In this film, it is insisted that Michael needs to kill his family because of a voodoo-type curse. Yet again, he hunts down his family members, but this time he's tranquilized to sleep. Ignoring the plots of movies 3 through 6, in Halloween H2O, Michael is looking for a sister again. He switches between a variety of masks, settling on one with frizzier hair and eerily revealing eye holes. He's sliced to death by his sister. In Halloween Resurrection, it's revealed Michael faked his own death. His mask is similar to the original, but with the addition of very noticeable makeup. This time, he manages to kill his sister, but later on is electrocuted and presumed dead. Or is he? But that doesn't matter, as the films were rebooted in 2007. In the reboot, Michael is again introduced as a murderous blonde boy, but when fully grown appears to be built like a hulking dump truck. He eventually dons a Reese jumpsuit and the near original but much dirtier mask. In the reboot sequel, the mask is falling apart and Michael is donning new hobo-esque attire. The latest sequel reboot coming, we can only hope that Michael will return to his roots and sport a more vintage look.
Y'all trying to go skate? Let's go. I'm down. What about you, little man?
Welcome to the Kill Count, where we tally up the victims in all our favorite horror movies. I'm James A. Janice, and today we're finally starting what has been the single most requested series in Kill Count history, Halloween, John Carpenter's 1978 film that ignited the slasher subgenre. As I've said on this show before, Halloween was not the first slasher ever made, but it was the one that captured everyone's imagination. After producer Irwin Yablans came up with the movie's title and a simple premise involving babysitters, co-writers and producers John Carpenter and Deborah Hill set out to make horror history with a laughably small budget of only $320,000, provided by Yablans and the quote-unquote grandfather of Halloween, Mustafa Akkad. There are lots of reasons this movie went so far on so little, from the iconic haunting score composed by Carpenter himself, to the suburban setting that made the audience feel as vulnerable as the victims they were watching, to the memorable performances by a 20-year-old Jamie Lee Curtis and the original Ernst Stavro Blofeld Donald Pleasance. But above all else, Halloween succeeded because of its blank-faced stalker Michael Myers, also known as The Shape. Played by filmmaker Nick Castle for a measly $25 a day, the man in the modified William Shatner mask terrified audiences and kicked off the first of the horror genre's royal franchises. Over the next couple of months, I'll be covering all of the Halloweens available on home video, meaning 10 installments in 4 different timelines. On October 19th, an 11th film will be released, which will start a 5th timeline for the series. But we'll have to wait for the Blu-ray for it to be on the Kill Count. Don't worry though, even without that latest installment, we're in for a crazy ride. I'll guide you through the franchise as Sam Loomis becomes a shrieking madman, as Michael's origin becomes tied up in the occult, and all the times that the series tries to reinvent itself, whether that's as a couple of hip millennial horror comedies, a low-class white trash hellbilly saga, or a Irish toy maker selling deadly Halloween masks. But before we get into all that, we gotta go back to Haddonfield, Illinois and count the kills that started it all. The movie begins with a jack-o'-lantern and a title card. Right away, even the opening credits are iconic, since they're backed by that dope-ass Halloween theme, and because when it zooms in on the pumpkin's eye and nose, it looks like Michael himself holding a knife. Cool. After that, we're in Haddonfield, Illinois, on Halloween night, 1963, in a first-person POV shot similar to the one that opened Black Christmas. The POV shots in Halloween were done with the recently invented Steadicam technology by cinematographer Dean Cundy, who would go on to shoot blockbusters such as the Back to the Future trilogy and Jurassic friggin' Park. We watch as our audience surrogate peeps in on a couple making out before they head upstairs for more heavy petting. After a stop at the kitchen drawer where Deborah Hill's hand grabs a butcher knife, the first-person view sees the dude putting his shirt back on and leaving the house. It's only been a minute, dude. Was that one of those never happens to me situations? The camera heads upstairs and grabs a clown mask from the floor, obfuscating our view as it walks into the very open bedroom of the topless Judith Myers. Girl, topless hairbrushing is the best, I'm sure, but maybe close the door for it, or else you risk this happening. Michael! Yep, this is Michael Myers' first kill, his older sister Judith, and he's such a noob at murder that he has to keep checking his stabbing form while he kills her. You're doing fine, Mikey, don't worry. When he's done, Judith is left as a topless bloody corpse lying on her bedroom floor. Michael heads back downstairs and out of the house right as his parents pull up. The extended first-person shot finally ends when they demask him and then just kind of stand there for an awkwardly long time without saying anything or emoting as the camera pulls away. Classic cold open though. Jump to Smith's Grove in the same state, now 15 years later on Halloween Eve. 'Twas a dark and stormy night when Dr. Sam Loomis, played by the masterful Donald Pleasance, joined chain-smoking nurse Marion Chambers to go to the Smiths Grove Sanitarium. They're going to pick up Michael Myers, who Loomis keeps referring to as an it, and transfer him to another facility. But things take a turn for the creepy when they see that the Smiths Grove inmates are out and about, getting off wet. Instead of being concerned about them catching hypothermia like a real doctor would, Loomis presses forward and hops out to open the hospital gate. That's when Michael Myers hops on top of Marion's car and grabs her by the face, tormenting her until she flees from her vehicle that he promptly Grand Theft Autos. Michael must have been top of the class in the Smiths Grove Driver's Ed program. The next day, back in Haddonfield, we meet Laurie Strode, a modestly dressed high schooler played by Jamie Lee Curtis. Her Halloween night plans involve babysitting this little kid Tommy Doyle, who's all sorts of scared of the abandoned Myers house. Laurie has a key to the place because her dad's a local realtor, but as she leaves it under the mat, she doesn't notice that she's being watched by a shape inside and a shape outside. Must be one of those interior-exterior shapes. The shape continues its voyeuristic tendencies when Laurie's in school, staring at her from behind Nurse Chambers' car parked across the street. But while Laurie's busy being an SMRT smart girl, he vanishes into thin air. Which way did he go, Laurie? Which way did he go? In Smiths Grove, Dr. Terrence Wynn, a colleague of Lewis's, blames the small doctor for Michael's escape and says it's unlikely that Myers is headed to Haddonfield, 150 miles away.
For God's sakes, he can't drive a car. He was doing very well last night. Maybe someone around here gave him lessons.
On his way to Haddonfield, Loomis stops at a payphone to warn the Haddonfield police, and that's where he notices a truck on the side of the road. He finds evidence that Michael was there, but runs off before seeing our second body on the kill count, this poor truck driver who Michael apparently killed and stripped for that classic blue jumpsuit. Damn, man, stealing cars and clothes? Michael's just as much a thief as he is a murderer. Laurie walks home with her cheerleader friend Linda, played by PJ Souls, who's totally got a problem saying totally all the fucking time.
Totally.
They're joined by Annie Brackett, played by Nancy Kyes, whose credited stage name was, interestingly enough, Nancy Loomis. Michael Myers rolls by in his station wagon at a nice, slow, stalkery pace, but that doesn't stop Annie, the sheriff's daughter, from playing citizen cop.
Hey, jerk! Speed kill!
Michael stops his car threateningly, but after a pregnant pause, just keeps on driving. He catches back up with them later on the walk home when he's standing behind a bush staring at Laurie and Annie. But when Annie goes to confront him, he's disappeared once again. Michael does that a lot. He does it some more after Laurie gets home to a room decorated with smart person stuff. She sees him outside by the clothesline, then somehow, without her gaze ever breaking, he just disappears. That one doesn't make any sense to me, but okay, we get it. He's a creepy stalker. Meanwhile, Dr. Loomis arrives at Haddonfield and goes to the cemetery, only to find that Judith Myers' gravestone has been removed, straight plucked from the ground.
He came home.
Later that day, Laurie gets picked up by Annie, and they're having such a good time smoking a doob and listening to Blue Oyster Cult that they don't notice Michael tailing them in the Myers mobile. He gives them some space when they pull over to talk to Annie's dad, Sheriff Brackett, who's checking out a hardware store burglary that sounds like a very specific hit.
All they took was some Halloween mask, a rope, and a couple of knives.
Wait, why did that hardware store have Halloween masks? Somehow Papa Brackett doesn't smell that dang weed in the car, so he waves the girls goodbye right before Loomis shows up and introduces himself. Loomis, look behind you, dude. The shape you want is right behind you. Night comes and Sheriff Brackett takes Loomis to the Myers house where it all went down 15 years ago. They find a dead dog off screen, the first of many, many pooches that Michael Myers will kill throughout the series.
He got hungry.
And eat? Did he eat that dog corpse, or is that a metaphor, Loomis? During a tour of the house, Donald Pleasance gets the capital A act when he tells Brackett about Michael's psychiatric history.
I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes. The devil's eyes.
Yeah, it's some good acting. Now that it's nighttime, the teens of Haddonfield are out to make some babysitting bucks. Michael silently observes Annie as she gets to the house she's watching over, the Wallace family home, while just across the street at Tommy Doyle's house, Laurie is already nice and cozy, shitting all over Tommy's taste in comic books. Annie calls Laurie to tell her that she's arranged a date with our virginal final girl with a dude she's into named Ben Tramer. Pretty much every scene with Laurie and her friends involves them telling her she needs to get laid, but I wanted to mention this combo in particular just because Ben Tramer comes back in a hilarious way next movie. Tommy looks out the window and sees the shape standing outside the Wallace home, but when he gets Laurie to look, Mike's pulled his disappearing act again. Turns out he's gone around back to watch Annie take her shirt off after she spilled some butter on it. While he's peeping in, the Wallace family dog Lester comes across him and starts growling. Michael makes short work of the poor canine and kills him. But in case you're new here, I only put humanoids on the kill count. Sorry, Lester. Annie gets a call from her boyfriend Paul saying that his parents are gone and that it's bone o'clock. So she takes little Lindsay Wallace across the street to drop her off with Laurie and Tommy. The kids immediately immediately get to watching The Thing from Another World, a fun inclusion in hindsight, since Carpenter would go on to make his own version of The Thing just 4 years later, which is still the best horror movie ever made. Come at me. Lori agrees to watch over Andy's charge while Andy takes a visit to Pound Town.
The old Girl Scout comes through again.
Annie never gets to fulfill her teenage desires, though, because after she gets in the car to go pick up El Jerko, she's attacked by Michael Myers from the back seat. He strangles her in a lengthy silent scene with no noise except for his heavy breathing and the sounds of her struggle, until she finally starts blaring the car horn in an effort to attract some help. That's when Michael cuts the kill short with a butcher knife, slitting her throat as Andy Brackett becomes the third member of our kill count. Michael may be good at killing discreetly, but he's got to work on his body disposal, since Tommy sees him from the window carrying that corpse under a bright porch light. Props for being able to open that door with no hands, though, Mike. You'd be great at one of those grocery deliveries. Service job. In case you were having some unpleasant withdrawals from the lack of Loomis, we get a fun little scene wherein he scares some kids that had bullied Tommy earlier. They're outside the Myers house, daring each other to go touch it like friggin' Boo Radley lives there, when Loomis overhears their names and fucks with them.
Hey, Lonnie, get your ass away from there.
Loomis is kind of a dick to kids. I love it. But sorry, back to horny teenagers. Linda and her boyfriend Bob roll up to the Wallace house so they can bang there while Andy keeps little Lindsay distracted. Of course, neither Annie nor Lindsay are home right now.
It's totally dark.
So they're content to just make out on a stranger's couch, way too distracted to see the shape standing mere feet away watching them. Later on, they call up Lori, who tells them that little Lindsay is gone for the night, so they escalate their debasement of the Wallace home to full-on fucking in the parents' bed. Also, is that a real pumpkin jack-o'-lantern on the nightstand? Who does that? They have an unusually short sex session, after which Linda is totally lying when she says it was fantastic, and then she sends Bob off to get her a beer. As he leaves, he breaks one of Randy Meeks' cardinal rules for surviving a horror movie.
I'll be right back.
After Bob grabs the beer, we get one of the best scenes of the movie when Michael pops out of a closet and starts choking Bob against the wall. It's a pretty solid jump scare, and the kill is Michael's finest in the film, as he lifts Bob up off the ground with a single hand and then uses his other hand to stab Bob with his butcher knife. The icing on top, though, is that when Michael removes his hand, Bob's feet stay elevated off the ground with a couple of head tilts, showing he can appreciate his murder art from multiple angles. Linda Vanderklok is our next hapless victim, and Michael dresses up for the occasion. It's Ghost Bob Michael Myers, and it's probably my favorite image from the movie. It's followed by what's probably many other people's favorite image from the movie, as Linda tries to seduce Bob out of his Halloween spirit.
See anything you like?
After Ghost Bob is totally unresponsive, Linda goes to call Lori, but as soon as Lori answers, Linda is attacked by Michael, who strangles her with the phone cord. Lori hears the noises over the phone, first assuming it's some kind of sex noise prank, but to her credit, she does become concerned by the time Linda is totally down and out for another kill on the count. After she's dead, Michael's all like, new phone, who dis? But Lori hangs up on it. Boring conversation anyway. And back to Dr. Loomis, who inexplicably just now sees that Marion Chambers' station wagon is parked across the street. Maybe you would have noticed it earlier if you weren't too busy cussing out the neighborhood kids, Loomis. But now that he knows Michael's in town, he's on the move. Concerned about that moany phone call from the Wallace home, Lori heads across the street to check on Annie and Linda. It's completely dark inside, and after she heads upstairs, she follows the only light on into the bedroom, where she gets to kick off her final girl circuit by finding Annie's body splayed out on the bed in front of Judith Myers' gravestone. And as with any true final girl circuit, she finds the other bodies in unlikely ways, with Bob swinging down from the ceiling somehow, and a cabinet door opening on its own to reveal PJ Souls doing a pretty goofy dead body face. The corpses scare Lori out into the hallway, where, in a very cool shot, the shape materializes from the shadows behind her. He steps out and stabs at her shoulder, grazing her with a slash that sends her over the banister and crashing to the bottom of the staircase. One of the most infamous horror movie chase scenes begins as Lori tries to escape through all these locations that the movie has done a great job setting up, so you know the exact physical layout of them. I think it's one of the undervalued geniuses of this movie. Lori gets back to the Doyle house and is locked out as Michael slowly makes his way across the street towards her. When Tommy finally lets her in, she barks at him to go hide upstairs.
Do as I say! Boogeyman, hurry!
With the lights off and the phone line dead, Lori hunkers down and grabs a knitting needle. Michael appears behind her, having come through the window, but when he misses an easy strike with his knife, she's able to stab him in the neck with the needle, which gets him down to the ground. But Lori's a Gen 1 final girl who doesn't know the way this shit works, so she assumes that a single stab has put her tormentor out of business for good. She goes upstairs to tell the kids that it's over and that she killed him, but Tommy knows better.
You can't kill the boogeyman.
Tommy's right. Michael's back, baby! Lori ushers the kids into one room and goes into another, where she hides in the closet. Michael follows, and we get another classic scene as he violently shakes the closet door for a while before punching through it and turning on the light. It's a good thing Lori never listened to her mom be dearest, though, and has a wire hanger at her disposal, which she turns into a weapon and then uses to stab Michael Myers right in the eye. Michael drops his knife, and she presses on with the attack, stabbing him in the chest with it. This knocks him out again and gives Laurie another false sense of security as she leaves the comfort of the closet. Once again, she consults the children and tells them to go down the street to a neighbor's house and call the police. After she sends them off, she sits there catching her breath and doesn't notice when behind her, Michael single-handedly pioneers a new workout program, Horror Killer Abs. Get that six-pack in 10 movies or less, one sit-up at a time. The kids run out the front door screaming bloody murder, and since Loomis happens to be walking by, he puts two and two together and heads towards the house. Good thing, too, since Michael has made his way over to Laurie and starts strangling her with his bare hands. Right as Loomis runs upstairs, Laurie pulls off Michael's mask, giving us a fleeting glimpse of the very plain-looking face of evil in a shot where Michael was played by a dude named Tony Moran. Loomis fires his gun at Michael, then follows through and shoots him 5 more damn times with his gun, sending the spree killer out onto the back balcony and over the railing, where he lies on the ground in defeat. After the gun smoke is cleared, Laurie gets a debriefing from Loomis.
What's the boogeyman?
As a matter of fact, it was.
Michael's boogeyman credentials are sealed when Loomis looks outside to find that Michael Myers is missing. The bastard somehow survived and is free to kill once more. The movie ends expertly with a montage of all the locations we've seen as Michael's heavy breathing grows louder and louder, suggesting that nowhere in Haddonfield is safe from the shape. It's a good thing Michael brushed himself off to kill again, because his initial body count is pretty weak. Here, I'll show you at the numbers. Only 5 people died in Halloween, but that's fine for a first outing. It leaves room for growth. The victims consisted of 2 guys and 3 gals, giving the ladies the edge in this pumpkin pie chart. With a runtime of 91 minutes, we wound up with a kill on average every 18.2 minutes. I'll give the golden chainsaw for coolest kill to Bob. The shot of him pinned to the wall is one of the best shots in the movie, and the head tilt that Michael does tells us everything we need to know about it. Dull machete for lamest kill will go to the trucker, whose body wasn't even found by anyone but the audience. Poor dude. And that's it. Halloween came out in 1978 and ignited a brush fire of slashers, and eventually its own lengthy series of sequels. We'll look at the first of those, Halloween 2, next week. But until then, I'm James A. Janice. This has been the Kill Count. Thanks a lot for watching this week's Kill Count. I want to thank a couple of patrons like Stephen William Swanberg, Gage Hill, and Seth Vermillion, and an extra special thanks to Romulus Vane. We're finally doing Halloween. It's probably my least favorite of the big 3 series, but this first movie may be the best movie out of all of them. It's such good filmmaking, man. You know, like filming.
I'd give anything in the world if that little girl with the red hair would come over and sit with me. You know why that little red-haired girl never notices me? Because I'm nothing. When she looks...
Welcome to the Kill Count, where we tally up the victims in all our favorite horror movies. I'm James A. Janice, and today we're looking at The Strangers, released in 2008 by writer-director Brian Bertino. Strangers is a home invasion movie boiled down to its most basic elements. You've got a young couple in an isolated house being tormented by a group of strangers in masks for no apparent reason. That's really all there is to it. In fact, during the entire movie, you only ever see 8 people. It's hard to think of a horror movie with less frills than this. But whether that simplicity is a strength or a weakness is up to taste. I think the movie does a great job building psychological terror and using really effective jump scares throughout. And I like how the movie works as a commentary on how horror in a post-9/11 world is random and real instead of moralistic and fantastical. On the other hand, if you think this is a slow, boring movie where barely anything happens, I mean, I ain't gonna argue with you. Just look at the runtime of this kill count compared to all the others. There is not a lot that happens here. Even with such a deliberate pace, is there a chance that this movie can rack up a decent body count? Well, let's find out and get to the kills. The movie begins with a card saying this is inspired by true events, which is kind of true, but they weren't exactly the events that the other card describes, which is the setup for the movie. In actuality, Bertino was inspired by like half Manson murders, half some other shit. We hear a distressed 911 call as we watch some fancy lads go into a house where it looks like there was a party that got a little too hardy. Gonna need a lot of club soda for that state. Let's jump back in time with a title card. Get Strange. Our non-stranger protagonists are Kristen and James, played by Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman, and it looks like they've just come from a wedding and or wedding-related soiree. They're at James's family summer home, And although the place is decked out with everything you need to get the love juices flowing, from beds of rose petals to candles for mood lighting, it doesn't exactly look as though either of these two feel like making love. In fact, the company is so bad that James is calling his buddy Mike and asking him to come pick him up, since things did not go as planned that night. Spoiler, fellow James, they don't get better. We find out in a flashback that earlier that night, James had popped the big question to Kristen. Things, well, let's just say that's not exactly the face you want to see in that moment. One of the things this movie has going for it, though, is how these two aren't angry caricatures sniping at each other over a failed relationship. Even though the proposal was turned down, both of them are really sensitive of how the other must be feeling.
I'm so sorry it wasn't the way you thought it would be.
Seeing that they're good people just makes the impact of what happens later that much greater. Hell, they're probably still in love, or at the very least in lust, as they start to have a little living room furniture sex before a big coitus knock at the door interrupts their intimacy. At the door is a blonde woman obscured in shadow, and it sounds like she wants to know if her friend can come out and play.
Is Tamara here?
But James tells her she's got the wrong house. There's one of those, okay, you can get the fuck off my porch now pauses before the woman leaves with a cryptic line.
See you later.
When Kristen notes that she's out of cigarettes, James offers to go get her some as an excuse to take a drive. He takes off for the store, leaving a fire for her to stay warm by, and while he's gone, she tries on the ring that she rejected while listening to the unsettling baby voice of Joanna Newsom.
Proud and loving.
Sorry, her voice creeps me out a little bit. But then there's another loud knock at the door, and if you're watching this movie at 2 a.m. by yourself, now's the time you start to get a little freaked out about it. Yeah, man, it'll get you. Kristen asks through the door if anyone's there, and the same woman from earlier asks once again if Tamara's home. Kristen tells her to shoo and locks the door, but then she notices the fire getting smoky, possibly from some smokestack tampering, like she's getting punked by Bert from Mary Poppins. It sets off the smoke alarm, which she removes haphazardly so it falls to the floor, and then there's more knocking at her door. She finds her cell phone dead, so she plugs it into charge, then uses the house phone to call James and tell him, hey, you might want to get back here. Things are getting weird, as she changes into less vulnerable attire. After the call abruptly disconnects, we get the best shot of the movie, and honestly, one of the creepiest shots I've ever seen, as Kristen fails to notice a man with a mask over his head step into the shadows in the far background of the house. The shot goes on for a long time as he silently observes her, and when she finally does turn around in a different angle, a return to the first shot shows he's not there anymore. Expert creepy filmmaking right there. That's how you spook an audience without using jump scares. Another knock alarms her enough to finally arm herself with a knife, but she realizes she's in serious shit when she sees that the smoke detector has been picked up off the floor and set on a chair, and that her charging cable has been cut in half by a saboteur. When she goes to the window to check outside for any grumpkins and snarks, she finds the man in the mask staring back at her. She stumbles back, startled, and bumps into the record player, which sets it off with a repetitive skip that scores the next couple of minutes. The front door cracks open, and when she peeks outside, she briefly catches a mask. But wait a minute, it's not Halloween. So, safe from Sam's judgment, Kristen closes the door on the doll-faced trick-or-treater and retreats to the bedroom to bunk her down with her knife. She hears the skipping record get turned off, but it's only James that comes around the corner, concerned about her hand that's been cut open and the way she's freaking out, man. He searches the house to make her feel safer, but doesn't find anyone or anything suspicious. Guess they probably should have checked the fireplace, where Kristen's phone is heating up more than a Galaxy Note 7. When they look out through the window, though, they do see the blonde lady standing in the middle of the road, just staring at their house. Pretty creepy thing for a person to do, and oh, now she's gone. When James goes out to his Volvo to get his phone, he finds all his car windows have been smashed. Then a hand reaches out and touches him, but the person runs away when James turns around. Clearly, these people are just fucking with them. When James sees the blonde lady in the road again and asks her what she wants, she doesn't respond. Kristen sticks her head out to see what's going on, and then the blonde lady is gone again. Neat trick, I guess? Back inside, James bandages Kristen's hands while she wonders why anyone would do this. Then he sees that his phone has also been tampered with, prompting him to say that it's time for them to leave. As they're pulling out, though, some headlights come up on them, and driving the truck is a pin-up masked lady who might be having a little bit of a brake issue there. Might want to have the Pep Boys take a look at that. They manage to get back inside the house, where James begins looking for his dad's old gun. He finds it on top of the bookcase, and with some ammo from the bedroom, loads that boomstick up. Also in the bedroom is some personalized window writing. Oh, shit, they're just trying to say hello. I think it's all good, guys. Put the kettle on and invite these folks inside. But right when they're going to throw their front doors open and let bygones be bygones, an axe through the door signals that maybe the opportunity for tea time has passed. They board up the door with furniture and bunker down in the bedroom as the record player starts spinning Mama Tried by Merle Haggard. Mama tried. Mama tried. And if you're going to be tortured by strangers with music, it could be a lot worse. I'm not even into country music, but this song is dope as hell. We're about halfway through the movie now, so it's a good time to introduce a golden god into the mix. James's friend Mike that he called earlier, played by Glenn Howerton, whose career I would steal in a heartbeat if I had a monkey's paw, gets to the summer home in response to James's voicemail, only to be greeted by his window getting busted out. There's no one outside that he can see, but he does notice the remains of that little fender bender from earlier, and he realizes something must be wrong, you know, because of the implication. Also, he's a huge Merle Haggard concert fan, so he can't help but wander into the free concert going on inside. The loud music drowns everything else out, so Mike doesn't hear when the man in the mask shows up behind him, nor when he raises his axe to get this kill count started proper. But then this happens. Damn, that sucks, man. You definitely just shot your best friend in the face there, James. It's a tragic death, not only because this would give James PTSD for the rest of his life, but also because it means we don't get any more Glenn Howerton in this movie. I saw his name in the credits and set my excitement level way too high. James crawls over to check out the body, and yep, confirmed, it fucking wrecks him. Probably doesn't help when he finds an accusatory message in his window mail. You think they wrote that with blood or lipstick? It's very nice lettering, either way. He heads outside because there's an old radio in the barn, and he wants to use it to call for help. But before he does, he checks on his car and finds that it's been all tampered with. I'm not a mechanic or anything, but that don't look good. On his way to the barn, he sees one of the assailants with a flashlight, and he almost manages to get a shot off before they blind him with the light, and the man in the mask revs up like a deuce and runs through the night to knock James out. Kristen realizes something is wrong, so she makes a run for the barn herself, but she trips along the way, and this pretty much wrecks her shit for the rest of the movie. As she crawls her way to the barn, the pinup stranger comes up behind her. But again, these people are just toying with their victim, so when Kristen turns around, the pinup lady is gone. Inside the barn, Kristen finds the radio James mentioned, but right as she gets it working and finally hears another voice on the other end, pinup lady appears to smash her radio to pieces with an axe. Guess she was never a fan of the whole CV craze. Then apparently she just lets Kristen crawl away, because that's what we see next. And I totally understand if you're frustrated by the lack of get up by the killers in this movie. They're taking their sweet-ass time with this. I mean, shit, Dollface is just chilling on the swing set there. Can you imagine Jason taking a break from his killing to just mess around on a playground for a minute? It'd be kind of cute, actually. Kristen eventually makes her way back inside, where the power gets turned off, so now the lighting is even moodier. She narrowly avoids being seen by the man in the mask. Or maybe he does see her and he's just fucking with her, I don't know. Either way, she hides inside a cabinet, giving us the classic horror shot of looking out at the dangerous killer from behind a thin cover of wooden slats. The same thing happens that always happens in these situations. It appears to work since the man in the mask leaves, but then she gets discovered. The quiet atmosphere of the movie definitely helps the impact of the jump scares it does have, so this is a great one to watch next time you're aching for a hit of cortisone. Dollface doesn't kill Kristen or anything. Instead, she just shakes the cabinet door a lot and then walks away. Kristen pokes her head out, maybe a little insulted that Dollface lost interest in her so fast. Now she's more fixated on Kristen's ring, and while she messes with it, Kristen arms herself with a knife. Again, she just can't wrap her head around the why of it all.
Why are you doing this to us?
But the only answer she gets is James getting tossed into the living room by the man in the mask, who's now armed with a gun. With the front door blocked by pinup stranger, Kristen heads to the bedroom where she gets surprised by the lights coming back on. Maybe they're done now? Nah, man in the mask tackles her against the hallway and knocks her out the box, Luke. He drags her back into the living room, finally done toying with her and ready to move on to the film's finale. Next thing you know, it's morning, and this shot of the house in daylight adds a lot to the terror of this movie. Normally, the bad things in horror films happen in the dark, and you assume that if the characters can just make it through the night, they'll be saved by sunup. But here it is, late morning by the looks of it, and Kristen and James are tied to some chairs facing down the three masked invaders that have tormented them all night. Kristen asks one more time why they're doing this to them, and she finally gets an answer.
Because you were home.
Things seem pretty hopeless as Kristen and James hold hands and look at each other with affection. And I hate to break it to you, but they are hopeless. And to show Kristen and James just how hopeless things are, the strangers demask. We never get to see their faces, but by revealing them to the couple, they're saying, we're fine with you seeing us without our masks, so you about to be dead. And that's absolutely terrifying. Kristen begs and pleads, but to no avail. James gets stabbed in the torso by the man in the mask and then by the pinup stranger, while Dollface stranger takes the knife to Kristen's gut. Multiple stabs are heard as the camera cuts away from this exercise in sociopathy, and when we come back, we find James dead on the floor, having succumbed to the knife wounds. Most horror movies have kills that are silly or over the top or so unlikely that they can be fun, but The Strangers deals in realistic, absolutely horrifying carnage, and it makes this death feel way more impactful than most. But Kristen's still alive, and when Mike's cell phone starts ringing, she musters up the strength to crawl her way over to it, hoping for some kind of salvation. But she misses the incoming call, and before she can make an outgoing one herself, the male stranger shows up again, much to her dismay. He takes the phone away and apparently leaves Kristen to her own fate, whatever it will be, lying on the hallway floor. We're back to those buttoned-up Mormon boys who run into the strangers when they stop their truck on the side of the road. Dollface asks for one of their pamphlets, and after admitting that she's, sometimes a sinner, the boys give one to her. The strangers get back in their truck, and Pinup Lady gives a debriefing.
It'll be easier next time.
Yeah, because you'll have a whole decade to prepare for the next time you pray at night. The Mormon boys get to the scene of the crime, just like we saw in the beginning, and look on at all the carnage the strangers have left. When one of them reaches out towards Kristen, yeah, that happens. And that's the end of the movie. The strangers did a good job terrorizing the victims and the audience, but how'd they do in the kill count department? Let's find out into the numbers. In a brand new kill count low, only 2 people died in The Strangers, and they were both male. So, yeah, obviously we're looking at one really blue pie chart, right? Yeah. With a runtime of 88 minutes, that's a kill on average every 44 minutes. that a new record too? I'll give the Golden Chainsaw for coolest kill to Mike, since I only have 2 to choose from, and his have the more explicit gore effects. Plus, it's sudden and a pretty good jump scare. Dog Machete for lamest kill goes to James, just kind of by default, although like I said during the kills, it's a pretty horrifying way to go out. And that's it. Strangers came out in 2008, and I know it's kind of stretching the criteria of kill count movies with its 2 deaths and quiet plot, but with Prey at Night coming out on Friday, I figured you'd want to see me cover it. And kill count's the only way I have right now. On Friday, we finish off Freddy with the Nightmare remake, and until then, I'm James A. Janice. It's been the Kill Count. Thanks a lot for watching my Kill Count for The Strangers. I want to thank a couple of my patrons like Dorsey and Saul Robles. Also want to thank Chelsea for making that mask in just a couple of hours for me at the drop.
I was a little nervous when I heard Venom was joining the team. I mean, he's an alien symbiote, or in civilian terms, a parasite. And let's be honest, a parasite and a medic aren't meant to get along. In fact, I wouldn't mention this to Venom, but in my line of work, I actually kill parasites. But Venom has pleasantly surprised me. Sure, he lacks a certain amount of social grace and appears to be fighting an uphill battle against gum disease. And not to brag, but our connection on the battlefield is undeniable. I even told Venom, I think we make something I like to call a dream team. He did not interpret that the way I intended. We intended. What?
Marvel Strike Force. Download now for...
Dear Bethesda, hi, it's me, Austin. Look, we've been through this before, so let's just skip the foreplay. You know I'm here. In fact, you may have seen this coming for a while. I know I have. It comes up in the comments of almost every single letter I write to you. You know what I'm talking about. Fusion cores. Actually, you've never responded to a single letter I've written to you other than blah, 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 ex parte this, legal counsel representing Mr. Howard that, so maybe you weren't dreading it at all. I know that I have, however. Fusion technology is a fucking beast to talk about and work the math on, and I thought it would be an impossible topic to cover, and yet, here we are. So let's get down to it and talk about the most advanced and surprisingly badass piece of tech in the entire Fallout franchise. Your fusion cores come up frequently because, well, some people don't like them. People like RuneMaker and GameCrow are expecting me to rip your fusion cores to shreds in a rant so spectacular that it ripples through the space-time continuum to the design board 7 years ago and convinces you not to put fusion cores in the game at all. And to understand why this is, first we're going to have to talk about the lore of fusion technology in Fallout and the science behind real nuclear fusion and a whole host of other things that are so fucking cool they have to be measured in Kelvin. Anybody? Anyone? Just no. Okay, I'll just. All right. Fusion technology has been at the heart of the Fallout franchise since its inception, with microfusion being the darling of the series. Microfusion cells were the answer to the huge energy demands of weapons like laser rifles, plasma rifles, and even the giant Gatling lasers. Microfusion cells are described as self-contained fusion reactors and are analogous to batteries. And for the most part, this has remained consistent across the various titles, all the way up to and including Fallout 4. But what is a fusion reactor? Well, it's a place where a fusion reaction happens. Okay, that's not helpful, but it's true. More specifically, though, in terms of energy and power, a fusion reactor is a method for creating harnessable electricity from controlled fusion reactions. In order to understand this fictional technology a bit better, though, let's look at something that's very, very real in our world: nuclear power plants. Nuclear power plants create energy the same way we've been creating energy for generations: boiling water. No, seriously, a modern-day nuclear reactor basically works by engineers chucking a hunk of enriched uranium in a bucket of water so it heats the water up. Eventually, the water boils into steam. This steam pushes turbines, which in turn transform kinetic energy into electricity. Nuclear power plants take advantage of the energy released by nuclear fission, which is the polar opposite of nuclear fusion. Nuclear fission is honestly pretty complicated, and there's many types, but at a basic level, it's just an atom falling apart. When these atomic particles separate, energy is released, and in the case of uranium-235, this energy is consistent, predictable, and harnessable for the slow creation of electricity in a nuclear power plant, or it can be weaponized and forced to undergo fission rapidly, releasing nearly all of its energy all at once. And we know how that story ends. Fusion, by contrast, isn't atoms breaking apart because they can't hold themselves together, but actually two atoms smashing into one another to form a new, heavier atom. And while we haven't quite figured out how to induce controlled fusion for the purposes of creating power, we still managed to make it happen anyway. We haven't found a way to make fusion so that it produces more energy than it takes to create and sustain it. Although, in the 1970s, the PACER project briefly considered detonating hydrogen bombs underground and using their energy to heat water. Do not mix cocaine with engineering! The biggest hurdles with nuclear fusion are the immense amounts of energy that are needed to create the conditions that make fusion possible, containing the materials, and finding a way to extract the energy itself. If it's such a pain in the ass, why are scientists throwing themselves at the problem every day trying to find out a way to make it work? Well, because the energy released by nuclear fusion is incredibly high, and the materials used in it are incredibly abundant and clean. The easiest atoms to fuse are hydrogen atoms, and hydrogen is fucking everywhere. It's just littering our planet. Turn on the faucet and it's there. Uranium, by contrast, can be kind of a bitch to find, and making enriched uranium is even more of a bitch, and it leaves behind tons of radioactive garbage once it's been depleted. After hydrogen's been completely fused, all that's left is some non-radioactive helium, hydrogen, and a few dangerous neutrons, but nothing compared to uranium, and nothing that couldn't be disposed of easily. In order for fusion to happen, materials have to be heated up until they become plasma, and then they have to be heated up even more so that the atoms are moving fast as fuck and are more likely to slam into one another. How hot is hot? Well, it depends upon what you're trying to fuse, but it ranges from 100 million Kevin. No, but it ranges from 100 million Kelvin, 4 times hotter than the core of the fucking sun, to over 1 billion Kelvin, the temperature the universe was for several seconds during and after the Big Bang. Stars can create fusion at lower temperatures because they make up with their relative chilliness with incredible pressures we could never hope to replicate on our planet. Keeping something that's 100 million Kelvin in a bottle is no easy feat, but we're not here to look at that at all. If I had the answers on how to reliably produce nuclear fusion for the purposes of meaningful energy, I wouldn't be making YouTube videos right now. I'd be sipping margaritas at my personal villa carved into the side of Cerro de la Silla mountain overlooking Monterey. The point is, at some point in the history of the Fallout world, pre-war scientists and engineers not only solved the problem of creating centralized fusion power plants, but also found a way to reduce this technology into distributable, high-energy density consumer and military power units in the form of microfusion cells and fusion cores. Fast forward to Fallout 4, and we're ejecting and slapping fusion cores into suits of power armor and Gatling lasers at a somewhat alarming rate, something that comes as a bit of a surprise to those of us who have played other games in the franchise and are used to wantonly running around and
Yeah. Yeah, it's okay.
I don't know. Knowing him, he'll probably forget. He always is coming back, says he's gonna stream. Forgets to stream the next day. Yeah, I have a uniform inspection tomorrow. Sorry, I can't look at the chat right now. Give me a minute. No. Again, I'm sorry. I should have done this earlier. Nothing new has happened lately. Rose is back, but I haven't seen her in Night Core. And don't play Messenger here on the pad. Cool, code is done. There's a Messenger on Wattpad, but I don't think it would be right. Oh, okay, he left.
Power armor without any consequences. More alarming even is that fusion cores seem to be operating without problems for hundreds of years and then dissipate in what feels like minutes once inserted into a suit of power armor. What's actually going on here? Well, in order to figure that out, we're going to have to do some science! What's in a fusion core? Hydrogen, probably. Why hydrogen? Well, it's abundant, sure, but it's also the easiest element to fuse and contain. Fusion can be initiated at comparatively low temperatures of 100 billion Kelvin. Scientists in our real world are particularly interested in two specific isotopes of hydrogen: deuterium and tritium. Normal hydrogen is pretty simple. It's about as simple as you can get, actually. It's just one proton surrounded by one electron. Deuterium, however, has an extra neutron tacked onto it, and tritium has two neutrons. And when these two atoms collide, they form helium-4 and release an assload of energy. Well, okay, actually, it's almost no energy at all per fusion.
Oh, John.
17.59 mega electron volts, which is such a small amount of energy, I can't give you something to compare to. It's practically nothing, but you take a shit ton of these atoms, which are pretty damn light, and fuse them together, that energy starts to add up quickly. And all you need is some pure deuterium gas, since deuterium can fuse with itself to create tritium. Of course, having all these atoms together doesn't mean they're going to fuse exactly how you want them to, and deuterium goes through something called a cycle, which is all the possible fusions it can make, which thankfully is pretty small. You can take all these possible reactions and add their power output together, which will give you a pretty accurate average of how much energy you'll get per 6 deuterium atoms you have in your gas, which is 43.2 mega electron volts. So it's pretty safe to say that the gas being used in fusion cores is deuterium. But how much is there? Well, in order to figure that out, we have to figure out how much energy is in a fusion core. If possible, you say? Ha 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 ha! Sit your ass down, strap yourself in, and get ready for shit to get awesome! Of course, fusion generators were added into Fallout 4's Wasteland Workshop add-on, and I could have probably built one and connected a bunch of light bulbs into
See
it
you
to
later.
estimate its power, but that would have required me to learn the settlement system, so fuck that shit. You see, fusion cores power armor, sure, but they also power the heavy Gatling laser weapon. Our Gatling laser is the key to our fusion core's energy potential, but we need something to compare to. Gatling lasers are effectively the science fiction answer to miniguns, an actual weapon we have in our real world. So I opened up one of my survival games where weapon damage is more realistic and spawned and murdered a bunch of raiders at point blank range, recorded how many shots it took to kill them, did the same thing with the Gatling laser and averaged all my answers. I killed 50 raider veterans with each weapon, and the Gatling laser is actually quite a bit stronger than the minigun, 1.785 times in fact. Real-world miniguns fire 7.62 by 51 millimeter NATO rounds and deliver a terrifying 3,304 joules of energy per round. Miniguns in the Fallout world, however, fire 5 millimeter rounds, which thankfully are much less intense and are gonna make our numbers manageable. The rare 5 millimeter Remington ammunition delivers 504 joules at a fraction of a second. So if we take this and multiply it by our handy 1.785, we get a whopping 899 joules per shot for our Gatling laser. Delivered over the same amount of time, this means that the Gatling laser is delivering 2.06 megawatts. This means in less time than you can blink, this laser is delivering the same amount of power of an LMS class locomotive train engine. Maximizing power efficiency with all the nuclear physicist perks, a fusion core has an average of 624 shots per core, bringing our total wattage at 1.28 gigawatts over a quarter of a second. The power output of a fucking hydroelectric dam. Now, I know that sounds intense and impossible, but it's a surprisingly achievable level of energy. Even today, the wattage is a bit extreme, but that's the amount of energy in a lithium-ion battery weighing a surprisingly light pound and a half. Less than a kilogram. So, in order to... what's that? Oh, shit. Running out of time? Fuck. Have you seen my spreadsheet? I have so much more to go. Okay, fine. All right, just let me, 1 second. Just cue the music. No, not that music. Fuck you. You know what music I'm talking about. Yes, that music. Thank you. Knowing how much energy and power is in our Gatling laser, we can work our way backwards and figure out how much energy is in our fusion cores. Lasers are a notoriously lossy means of energy delivery, which is why energy weapons have been taken off in our world, and on a good day usually waste over 60% of their energy into the heat of the source generating. We'll see they made lasers more efficient in the world of Fallout and waste only 40% of their energy. In order to find out how much energy is used, we multiply energy delivered by 1.4, and to change that from joules to megaelectron volts, we multiply by Avogadro's constant to get a number in the quintillions. Divide that by the number of megaelectron volts created per deuterium cycle to get how many fusion cycles it would take to create that amount of energy. Multiply that number by 60 number of atoms used per cycle to determine how many deuterium atoms in total it would take to create that much energy. Divide that number by 2 to get how many molecules of D2, aka 2H2 gas that is. Since D2 gas is 2 deuterium molecules bound together. Divide by Avogadro's constant, using those processes can probably be simplified to get how many moles of gas that is, which you can use to determine how much mass that gas will take up. Almost none. Great. Fractions of a gram and fractions of a pound. Cool. Of course, this isn't the only factor to consider, and presuming that fusion is created on demand to meet energy demands, this means that gas is going to need to be kept at a state of near fusion, which requires energy to maintain. Since most of the readily available form of energy is in the cell itself, it stands to reason that fusion is used to sustain the heat and run the process. This means that over time there will be a power draw and loss of fusible atoms. Since all power cores were created at least 210 years before Fallout 4, we can presume that they have enough deuterium gas in them to maintain fusion for 210 years, plus the gas that's used by the core itself in the game. To determine this draw, I took a percentage of 1 cycle's worth of atoms consumed to create energy from 1 shot from the Gatling laser, turned that into atoms per second consumed, and atoms per year, and atoms for 210 years. I added this on top of other gas, giving us the amount of hydrogen atoms that were consumed in total from the time the bombs were dropped in 2077 all the way up until they're fully discharged in 2287 in Fallout 4. I then hopped in a suit of power armor and depleted 3 cores, 1 by just running around at normal speed, and 1 while sprinting nonstop, and a 3rd by jetpack. This gave me time in real-world seconds it took to deplete the core with various activities. Knowing the total energy in the core and knowing that 1 real-world second is actually 20 seconds of Fallout 4, I was able to determine power draw in watts power armor actually has. 9.63 watts for just running around, 109.17 watts for sprinting, and a feisty 1,106.42 watts for the jetpack. Applying hydrogen degradation time plus an average use per day model with 3 wattage buckets, I was actually able to paint a picture for usage time for all 4 Fallout games prior to Fallout 4, with a single core lasting 63 years in Fallout 1, 23 years in Fallout 2, 5 years in Fallout 3, and 3 years in Fallout New Vegas. Somewhat troubling, however, is that this means that the fusion cores are scheduled to all be completely expired 62 days after the start of Fallout 4, whether they've been used or not, due to the amount of hydrogen that's depleted to maintain the plasma state. The life of the cores can be extended with the inclusion of a lithium-ion chemical battery, which has the energy density of 0.876 megajoules per kilogram. But this eventually would bleed away as well, leaving the world without fusion cores, and incidentally, the Brotherhood of Steel completely
Hello, Claire.
find a way to refuel them. Interestingly, I applied the same numbers to brand new cores manufactured in 2077 and discovered that with average steady use of 12 hours a day, a brand new fully charged core would last 105 fucking years, which is exactly the amount of time riders in Fallout 1 said the fuel and power armor would last. The biggest danger is failure components. Likely safeguards were put in place, but should any of them fail, any number of extraordinary...
You and one other person are the only ones here. The one person's lurking, I'm estimating, is either Colin or someone else.
Barely fucking terrible things could happen. Best case scenario, the core simply goes cold, but if containment fails, then the core would turn into a rocket projectile shooting face melting hot plasma all over anybody unfortunate enough to be close. And if fusion regulators fail, let fusion go unchecked, it could release all the remaining energy at once, resulting at best blowing up the person using it and anyone nearby, and at worst turning the surrounding city block into a crater of molten rubble and powderized flesh. Anyway.
Light headache. No real motivation to do stuff right now. Otherwise, I'm fine. How are you doing today?
Turns out your fusion cores are actually pretty legit, Bethesda. I'm surprised. I'm also entirely certain you didn't put this much thought into it. In either case, I really think people need to consider not complaining about a piece of technology that still manages to work after being abandoned for 2 centuries. Apple could really take a page out of your book. Sincerely, Austin. P.S. Do you know that I used to do web design work? I hated it. I mean, there's not just the problem of getting...
Our mission was clear.
I'm fine. I've been worse.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Top 10 Trends.
Hello, Tristan.
War is rife with confusion. Fog of war in video games represents the lack of intel you have at any point. It's an easy representation, but in real life, military mistakes are not so forgiving. These are the top 10 worst mistakes in military history. Special shout out to the time Australia fought a war against emus and lost. Number 10, the Battle of Little Bighorn. The Battle of Little Bighorn, known to the Lakota and the other Indian States Army, the 26th, an 8-horse infantryman, and Custer himself was killed, as were 2 of his brothers. The total U.S. casualty count included 200. Sabine was a major in terms of the strategic, the impact, and the Muslim River, which today is along the border for the most Christian leaders he routed. Number 7, the Battle of Agincourt, or Agincourt. One of the 40-kilometers the communication in the chain of command, and the Light Brigade was sent instead on a frontal assault against a different artillery battery, one well prepared with excellent fields of defensive fire. He reached the Battle of Chongqing was a military that was when we ordered the captured soldiers to be unclaimed over 30,000 people in a row. It was Napoleon's army, 20,000 killed or missing, and Napoleon's armies for the remainder of his wars. Starvation and disease then took their toll, and desertion soared. Many of the deserters were taken prisoner or killed by Russian peasants. Weakened by these circumstances, the French military collapsed. Sources say that only 22,000 of Napoleon's men ever survived the Russian campaign. And number 1, the Battle of Stalingrad. It was a decisive Soviet victory, but not one without cost. The Soviets had over 1 million casualties at the Battle of Stalingrad alone, with over 470,000 killed or missing and 650,000 wounded or sick. They lost over 2,500 aircraft, 4,000 tanks, and 15,000 artillery.
I had to leave. I had to go to
no
sleep.
For the Axis either, the Germans had over 700,000
Yeah,
casualties,
before it ended.
900 aircraft, 1,500 tanks, and 6,000 guns. And as a result, the city of Stalingrad was basically left a giant pile of smoking rubble. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did like the video, please give it a like down below if you want to see what comes.
I've been called fearless, mostly by myself, but it's not totally true. I suffer from entomophobia, the fear of insects. So, naturally, when I heard Ant-Man and Wasp were joining my squad, I was concerned. Sure, it's really cool that they can shrink down to the size of bugs. But what if they were brainwashed and I got stung? Or what if one of them crawled up in my ear and laid eggs. So, loaded up my belt with bug spray, all kinds. Then I made a tactical decision to stuff my ears with cotton balls. Blocks the entrance. It's basic military strategy. Something I learned from my boy Steve. Captain America. Anyway, we find ourselves in this huge battle. AIM soldiers are blasting us left and right. Ant-Man and Wasp are showing off some amazing team-up moves. When suddenly, Ant-Man gets hit. So he starts calling for the medic. Me. Unfortunately,
Yes. Yeah. Fucking understand it. I'll be right back.
Find out if they could take my Roosevelt and my Roosevelt put the nuts together. So it's 25 days before 40,000 nuts that I burned. And so I thought they were replying back to what they had. Did you get my text? Okay. Are you staying after?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to check.
Don't forget, you gotta take a cubby tonight.
Yeah. Ow. Okay.
I love playing with new players. I love introducing people to Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing games. There's even a time where I found myself without a core group in a weekly game that I just started running brand new players through Lost Minds of Phandelver over and over every week. And it was a blast. If you're a longtime Dungeon Master, new players can bring a certain vigor and excitement to the game that older veterans
Alright, see you later, Cloud.
to the table with. But that being said, I've introduced a lot of new players to Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition since its release, and for me, there has started to emerge a few patterns, certain mistakes, if you will, that continue to pop up, specifically in character creation. Now, I don't think that these are mistakes like, whoa, you did that wrong, but rather mistakes that players sometimes come to regret, or mistakes that might shape the player's experience in a way that might take away some of the fun dynamics and collaborative group storytelling. So I want to talk about these character creation taboos, but in a positive way, that hopefully I can share some of my input in the campaign, or as another way to put it, creating a character regardless of the campaign and setting. I talk a lot on this channel about how Dungeon Masters and Game Masters need to set the right expectations for their game up front. And the campaign is going to be heavily giant themed, tell the players, right? But that doesn't do the group any good if the players don't take that information into consideration when creating their characters. And I totally understand that players they're just excited, right? They're pumped up and excited about a new D&D campaign, and they want to get right to working on building out that fallen paladin that has amnesia and needs to find the truth behind their powers. As a dungeon master, that's
Didn't lock it.
awesome character concept in mind. But in a lot of cases, players are doing themselves a disservice by putting the cart kind of before the horse in this case. Before you even start to come up with a character concept, you should at least speak with your game master to get a better idea of what type of game and setting the campaign will be in. It's really good to create that perfect servant of Celeborn out to destroy the foul undead abominations across the land. And the campaign is taking place primarily in the Sea of Swords with a ton of ship-to-ship combat. Or if your group is running Storm King's Thunder and you're trying to prevent giants from overrunning Golden Fields. Think of it like being an actor and trying out for a part in a new sci-fi movie. And you show up to the audition with your best Nash Bridges impersonation, just determined to play that character. It just doesn't gel sometimes. So ask your DM about the campaign and work with them to create a character that fits the campaign. The easier it is to fit your character into the narrative, the easier it will be for the Dungeon Master to actually use NPCs, locations, and lore from your character's background, especially if you try to include them in the process. You would be hard-pressed to find a Dungeon Master that wouldn't appreciate you bouncing a few different background ideas off of them when creating your character. And remember, guys, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. If your character fits the DM's narrative well, because you worked with them during the character creation process, they are far more likely to write in character hooks for you than someone who tells them that they already have a character, they've played them before, they just want to bring them back to this game and leaves it at that. The second character creation taboo is playing the same character over and over again. This also falls right into that category of this isn't a game-wrecking mistake, but rather something that players tend to do that I consider a disservice to themselves. Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition is a game where we get to play heroes who live in a world where laws of physics can be regularly broken with magic, where we can play a cut-purse Robin Hood or a brazen knight facing down an ancient dragon plaguing the land. So when I see players who get kind of in a comfort zone of playing the same thing over and over, I always try to give them a gentle nudge to just try out something new. But hey, if you want to play the same character, that's your choice. But you might be surprised at just how much character development and fun you can have even with that seemingly boring barbarian. So try something new and expand your horizon, especially if you have eyes towards getting behind the screen at one point. And while I may not speak for every fellow player and Dungeon Master out there, it's also nice for us when you don't show up to the table campaign after campaign and one shot after one shot with the same predictable character.
Hey, I'm Day 9 with Intel Streamers Bootcamp, and today I want to talk about
the third character creation taboo is creating a character with just too much background. This is another understandable mistake that players make, and as players who do this are, in my experience, the ones that are just the most excited about my game. But let me explain why I think this is something that you should refrain from. When you come to the table to play Dungeons & Dragons, you are there to share in a collaborative story with everyone else. Every character in the group will be going on adventures together, experiencing grief and loss, discovering new inner strengths, and dealing with impossible obstacles as a group. When you show up with 5 pages of backstory where you've been an elite trained guard, fought in a dozen wars, slain an entire orc tribe to avenge the lost loved one, found new love, experienced more tragedy when your second family died, discovered how to trust again when you were saved from the brink of death by a druid hermit, and then of course experienced more grief when he then succumbed to a mysterious illness, and now your heart is the cold, unmoving stone of a grizzled veteran, all before the campaign starts at level 1, it can be a little overwhelming, immersion breaking, and
Welcome
worst
back,
of all,
Silent.
you've created a character that has no more room for growth from future experiences. So the best piece of advice I can give you is to make sure that your character has
No
enough
problem.
road in front of them, so that the biggest impacts on your character and their outlook isn't one that you wrote yourself before the game even started, but is all of the little moments that you can share and experience together with your entire group. Taboo number 4 is the opposite, and that's not having enough backstory. When I see new players do this, to me as a DM, it signals that they may not be comfortable enough yet with the concept of the game, or they may be too worried about understanding the game mechanics, so they simply didn't have the time or understanding to come up with a background. If you're a player watching this video and you feel like that describes you at times, the biggest piece of advice I can give you is to just talk to your dungeon master. They are there to help. Even if you have a character idea, but you aren't familiar with the world that the DM has created enough to solidify those choices, that's fine. Just reach out to your DM with a general idea of what you want, and they can help you fill in those gaps. However, if you're a veteran and you show up to my table with no background at all, come on, man. I mean, if it's a beer and pretzels D&D one shot.
What are you doing? Just sending out hits to the guys I messaged so I don't lose them. Why would you lose your matchup? On my dating app, matches disappear, so I have to send out quick haze so they don't expire.
Dear Bethesda, hi again. It's me, Austin. Last week I wrote to you about your glowing sea, and its somewhat plausibility according to what we know about modern science. But, you know, thinking about nukes just raises more questions than it answers. Sure, we know about the glowing sea now, but what about the rest of the United States? What about China? What about the rest of the world? How many nukes would it take to turn the glorious United States into a smoldering wreckage of what it once was? The answer may surprise you. Those of you who watched my video last week know that the nukes in the Fallout universe are relatively small tactical nukes, ranging from 200 to 750 kilotons, which maximizes the immediate ground scatter of dangerous radioactive fallout, as opposed to larger bombs that do have a larger, more destructive blast radius, but eject a lot of their radioactive fallout into the stratosphere, where it tends to stay until most of the radiation dissipates harmlessly and falls to the ground. The basic setup for the Fallout franchise is pretty simple. Natural resources are diminishing, and the two largest military and economic powers, China and the United States, are fighting over what's left. Sometime before this, the Fallout timeline split from our own, where essentially the Cold War and mutually assured destruction tactics never ended. Mutually assured destruction, for those of you who either didn't learn it in school or simply erased it from your memory because of the sheer fucking terror and utter lack of humanity that's needed to precipitate this military doctrine was, where was I? Oh, right.
Mutually assured destruction, aptly shortened to MAD, is a method of passive warfare that basically means you kill me, I kill you. It described the relationship between the United States and the USSR during the Cold War, when there were far too many nuclear weapons on our planet. And the best way we could think of to keep ourselves from killing one another was to say, hey, don't launch nukes at me and I won't launch any at you. Thankfully, this ridiculous stance on international politics mostly dissipated, though personally I always kind of had the impression that it never fully left the table. Anyway, this is the world of Fallout, one where this idea never went anywhere, and someone, it doesn't really matter who, launched nukes, and so then everybody launched nukes at everyone important, and poof, Fallout started. Jesus Diaz at Gizmodo actually did the math to figure out how many nukes would have to be dropped to blink all of humanity out of existence in an instant. These figures were almost as tenacious as the cockroach, so unless we managed to eliminate all people instantly, our species would survive. And if Fallout as a franchise is any indication, this seems to be true. He estimates that it would take over 1.2 million nuclear missiles to eliminate all the people with raw nuclear ragey blasts. Holy fucking shit, that's intense. Okay, well, fine, whatever. Luckily for the designers at Interplay and Bethesda, that's not the world they created in their game. But enough dawdling. How many nukes would it take to create our game? Well, it's actually pretty easy to figure out. A 750 kiloton nuclear bomb creates an initial blast that's relatively small that kills anybody in its radius, but it can spread deadly doses of radiation in an eclipse of 20 to 25 miles in as little as 3 hours. More than enough of a window to cause significant casualties to anybody in that range. So we simply take the square mileage of China, about 3.7 million square miles, and the United States, don't forget to add Canada, because the United States annexed Canada during the Resource War, which gives us over 6 million square miles for the US. Add them together, divide by 25 square miles, and you get 422,000 nukes to falloutify both China and the United States. Shit, that's a lot. To put that in perspective, at the height of the Cold War, there were only 66,000 nuclear weapons on the entire planet. But you know what? The world of Fallout is a world where the Cold War basically never ended. Nuclear weapon production peaked in 1985 and has been dropping off significantly ever since. But what if, instead of ramping down production, the world kept building nuclear weapons at the rate it was at its peak, all the way up until everyone launched in 2077? Luckily, the math for this is pretty easy, and it gets us 218,556 nuclear weapons. Shit. That's an assload, don't get me wrong, but it's half the number needed to totally obliterate the United States and China. So, I'm sorry to say it, Bethesda and Interplay, but your Fallout universe makes no goddamn sense. And then, suddenly, I realized I was thinking about the problem all wrong. You see, my math was based around a United States and China, where the entire population is evenly spread out across the countries. And in order to cause maximum fatal damage, you'd have to drop nukes in a perfect grid. But this is not how humans populate regions, at all. We don't, just evenly spread out. We congregate. In fact, according to the United States Census Bureau, 94.6% of the United States is open rural space, aka not strategically significant. Most people in the United States live on only 5.4% of our land. That's a huge space reduction. Remember, in the world of Fallout, humanity isn't entirely wiped out, merely mostly wiped out. There are plenty of people who survived who didn't make it to vaults. And in order to enact mutually assured destruction, you just have to cripple and eliminate a nation, not turn it into glass. That means you eliminate the leadership and most of the population. Anyway, China's population is more spread out, but they also have vast areas that are almost entirely unpopulated. The map is a bit trickier since China's census data isn't quite as available and detailed, but they seem to be roughly twice as spread out as the United States. All said and done, it'd take about 15.8% of our original estimate of over 400,000 nukes to create a
Join us streaming if you guys want to go there.
66,676 nukes. Jesus. Sorry, I just need a minute because I just realized that at one point in our history, there were actually enough nukes on this planet to actually eradicate both the United States and Russia.
KK, John.
Like, it could have actually happened. Fuck, I have the numbers right here.
There you go.
66,676 nukes to kill almost everybody in 2 major countries, and in 1985 there were 61,000 on the planet. Fuck. What a terrible fucking idea. Who the fuck said, oh, we invented this device that can kill people with ferocity, as of yet unparalleled by anything that is not a Greek fucking myth, so let's make enough to fucking ruin everything. Fuck. Man. People who don't like it when I swear are really gonna have a field day today. Anyway, our earlier estimates said there could be as many as 218,000 nukes on Earth in 2077, which is more than enough to wipe out the United States, China, polish off Europe, and do a sizable amount of damage to a handful of countries in the Middle East. It stretches the imagination that there'd be enough nukes in everybody's arsenals, particularly during a time of resource scarcity, to completely fall out-defy the entire world. Considering that the major players in the resource wars were the United States, China, and Europe, they would have taken the brunt of the force of the launches. So what about the rest of the world? Well, it's not a cakewalk for them either. Countries neighboring targeted nations would have to worry about radioactive dust storms and ash. Furthermore, smoke from the fires caused by the launching of so many nuclear weapons would enter the atmosphere and absorb sunlight, causing a global cooling event called, fittingly, a nuclear winter. Now, it's not as dour as it may seem at first. In countries not dealing with nuclear fallout, growing seasons would be shortened by 10 to 40 days a year, and there'd be a drop in average global temperatures for as long as 25 years. When it's estimated most of the ash will have settled and things would mostly be back to normal. There'd be a higher risk of genetic mutation, but it'd be negligible. You know, this handily gives pretty strong evidence for there being pockets of the world that are effectively paradise compared to the United States and China. Countries in Africa and South America would very likely be safe from large strikes, and honestly are probably dominating the world technologically and economically, while we in the United States are forced to squabble and claw at one another in our shitty tribes and our little problems that don't matter. Are there Colombian drug lords in the Fallout universe that have unified to form advanced future governments? We'll probably never know. But anyway, that's enough of that. Turns out, horrifyingly, the world of Fallout is totally plausible, at least from a nuclear destruction perspective. I'm gonna go casually start digging my own Fallout shelter now. Oh, I guess that means, I can talk about vaults next week. Sweet! Sincerely, Austin.
So, how connected is the current road system? So there are basically 4 distinct major road systems on Earth. The biggest one being this one, the Eurasia one, the one spanning Europe, Asia, and Africa. These 3 continents are all connected by land, so it makes sense that they're all connected by road. Right? Wrong. Because I lied. It's impossible to cross from Africa to Asia fully on land because of this, the Suez Canal. This is the canal that makes the trip from Europe to Asia by boat, this instead of this. The only physical connection between the 2 continents is therefore the 3 bridges spanning the canal. It
the road system is still contiguous, so it still counts as one big road system. Speaking of big things, the sixth largest country in the world and the first smallest continent, Australia, has its own major road system. But there's not much more to say about it other than if you go a little bit this way, you get to America. Both of them. Much like Africa and Asia, the Americas technically are connected because of a man-made canal, the Panama Canal. But that's not a problem because there are multiple bridges spanning the narrow waterway. The problem is this, the Darien Gap. Not a single road crosses this desolate swampland spanning over the Panama-Colombia border. The area is overrun with paramilitary forces and drug lords. There's just not enough demand to make braving the marshy and dangerous area to build a road worth it. So that's why North America and South America have two completely separate, unconnected road systems.
So to recap, these four areas all have pre-existing road networks, but none of them connect with one another. So how can we fix that and live in a world where you can drive from New York to London and back again? Let's imagine that this global highway would originate in Cape Town, South Africa, and end in Punta Arenas in Chile, the southernmost city in the world with a population over 100,000 people. The current highway system from Cape Town to Kinshasa is fine and would take you 51 hours to complete the whole drive. But once in Kinshasa, our first problem arises. There is currently no bridge over the Congo River between Kinshasa and Brazzaville, so the only current way across is by a ferry. In order for our global highway to work, we need to build a bridge across, which will cost around $444 million. Assuming that it's built, the drive from Brazzaville to Adalia in Morocco can continue just fine with existing highways. The total driving time across all of Africa so far stands at 7 days and 6 hours. But here we encounter one of the largest problems to our global highway, the Mediterranean Sea. Luckily, at this point, though, the sea separates Morocco from Spain by only 14 kilometers. But it's not the length that's the problem, it's the depth of the water, which is up to 900 meters deep at some parts. It would be a gigantic engineering challenge to construct, and the estimated cost is somewhere around $24 billion. But let's assume that it's built and you're now across from Africa in the town of Algeciras in Spain. You can now drive all the way from this town to the other side of Eurasia in Magadan, Russia on currently existing highways. And that drive alone would take 7 days and 11 hours. When combined with your trip from Cape Town, the total drive from there to Magadan would take 14 days and 17 hours to complete. In order to connect more people on the global highway, UK citizens could transport their vehicles through the channel and begin their journey on French highways on the way to Magadan. If you live in Australia, New Zealand, or Indonesia, then I'm sorry, but it's probably not possible to build a bridge connecting you guys to the system with our current technology. The distances that Australia and New Zealand are from everything else means that any bridge built would have to be at least 165 kilometers over open ocean, which is not very feasible. So basically, if the rest of the system is built, if you're living just about anywhere in Eurasia, you would be able to drive to Magadan. But getting from there to North America is perhaps the greatest challenge that the system faces. This is a map of the Russian highway system, and as you notice, this entire area here is full of nothing. Over 2,000 kilometers of brand new highways would have to be built through this vast and freezing land to connect to the small village of Ulan near the Bering Strait. From here, mainland Alaska is only 82 kilometers away, but a bridge doesn't have to be built that long alone because of these. The Diomede Islands, luckily in the center between Alaska and Russia. Because of them, you only need to build 3 separate smaller bridges instead of one long one. And the water depth is actually quite shallow at only 55 meters deep. But still, due to the freezing temperatures here, the challenge of building it would be enormous, and the bridge would likely cost an insane $105 billion to complete. And then there's the problem that the closest town in Alaska is 160 kilometers away from where the bridge would be constructed at. So another highway would have to be built out to there. But this town is even further separated from the rest of the road system in Alaska, which means that even more highways would have to be built entirely from scratch to connect all the way to Fairbanks. From here, finally, you can take existing roadways all the way down on a 129-hour drive to Yabiza, Panama. The existing road system ends here at the aforementioned Darien Gap. So if the area could become a little more safe and a highway was built across it in the future, you could drive even further all the way down to Punta Punta Arenas in Chile, the southernmost major city in the world. To recap all of this one more time, these areas would have to see some major construction projects to build the global highway system. The longest route would be from Cape Town to Punta Arenas, and it would be over 52,000 kilometers long, take you over 28 days of driving time, and the entire system would likely cost at least $233 billion to build. That's a little over 1% of the United States' GDP, or about 38% of what the United States military spends in one full year. That may not seem like very much until you remember you could always just fly from Cape Town to Punta Arenas for about $2,000, and it would only take you about 27 hours instead of 675 hours. So this video was done in
Not yet.
collaboration with the new channel Half as Interesting. So if you'd like to know more about the longest possible drivable route in the world today, then please go ahead and check out his video next. If you enjoyed what you just watched, then I hope that you'll subscribe to my channel by clicking here. If you'd like to directly support my channel, you can visit my Patreon by clicking here, and I hope to see you again next Friday for another brand new video then.
Alright.
Boyfriend or girlfriend right now? No. Boyfriend or girlfriend eventually? You're not saying no. You have to say something.
Long game.
Is the Institute good for the common good? Anyway, I'm so sorry it took me so long to get around to doing a Fallout 4 episode. I mean, this is called rethinking, and it's about having, complex second and third thoughts about stuff. And I really had time before last episode to even have my first thought about Fallout 4, which was mostly just... Am I silent? Before I go any further, I just want to say that this episode contains some major spoilers for some plot points in Fallout 4. So, even though the game has been out for a month or so now, and I personally consider the grace period on spoilers to be over, if you care about that sort of thing, this right now is your warning. Abandon ship. Anyway, back to the Institute. Clean, calm, white, grass. Intellectualism is king, and they even outstrip the Enclave technologically. And they don't have a main quest centered around eliminating all tainted humans with biological warfare. 10 out of 10, guys. The ends justify the means. For those of you who watched my video on the Enclave, you'll know that this is an open and shut case. The Institute rocks. Good episode. What if it's not that simple? I mean, it can't be that simple. There's like 5 or 6 minutes of video left. I mean, what if? Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna skip ahead and we'll see what I missed, and then we'll just 1 second. The Institute has doomed all of humanity. Shit. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I don't think the Institute is awful. And
Okay.
I even did the Institute ending on my first time through the game. Why am I wearing a different shirt? Sorry about that. The Institute tried to replace me with a synth because the Institute is literally the worst. Now, let's get this episode fucking started, shall we? And sure, the Institute has a lot of things in common with the Enclave, whom many of you may recall I argued were much more suited than the Brotherhood of Steel for pioneering the recovery of human society. They have modern infrastructure and a grasp over human management that's more complex than, I'm the sheriff of this here town, don't you be causing no trouble now. And they don't even have the genocidal hate boner for the occupants of the wasteland like the Enclave does. And, okay,
Sure, they are sort of, kind of, entirely responsible for the plague of super mutants in the Boston area, and their reputation for stealing people and replacing them with synths isn't unwarranted. But I think it's easy to forgive the small stuff when it comes to wasteland overlords. I mean, the Institute isn't the remnant of old world government. They're descendants of academics and professors, leadership, and the staff of the Commonwealth Institute of Technology. The Fallout counterpart to MIT. You know, the place where Gillette cartridge razors, e-ink, email, and the fucking internet come from. Okay, what I'm trying to say is that the Institute is born out of a culture of science and engineering, not government. And they do some awful things, sure, but nothing really all that much worse than what we've already forgiven the Enclave and Alduin for. And at least in the case of the Institute, they're doing it to further research into how the universe fits together and not to brutally oppress thousands of people. Wait, does that mean you're on my side? Shut up! Of course not. Because for one thing, the Institute does oppress an entire race of people. An entire race that they created. You know, synths. Living, sort of breathing, sort of bleeding, but definitely feeling and definitely thinking creatures that were created without anybody having sex, and whose thoughts, feelings, and education were installed in like several minutes instead of several years. And so therefore, the Institute doesn't see them as the sentient living creatures that they clearly are. But honestly, that's not what makes them so awful. Nope, that's not what I'm saying. No, enslaving an entire race of people while dehumanizing or de-empathizing. You ever had those moments where you realize just how human-centric our language is? I mean, it makes sense. I mean, we're humans and we talk about ourselves a lot. And as far as we know, we're the most complex species yet, at least intellectually and socially. And so, I mean, it makes a certain amount of sense. But all I'm saying is that it's going to lead to some awkward social situations when we finally meet another sentient species in the universe.
Your ways, very supportive.
What was I saying? All right, slavery is bad, and social paradigms that are designed to dehumanize the oppressed and indoctrinate them in hopes that they accept their fate, as well as remove empathy from oppressors, are bad. And if you don't agree, just don't tell me about it. But as hot as talking about the individual agency and personal rights and liberties of synthetic intelligences gets me, that is just a small modicum, a fraction of the bigger problem. And since I plan on talking about synthetic rights in the future, let's just table that for now and leave it as the Institute treats synths as slaves without exploring any further whether or not it's okay. Which brings me to why, at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter if the Institute is good, bad, or somewhere in the middle. Because the Institute has doomed all of humanity. Worse than that. Okay, let's break it down. The Institute created synths to do their bidding, and it started out as simple stuff, like cleaning. Eventually, they started doing low-level maintenance, too. I mean, how different is maintenance and cleaning, really? Then they created human-like synths, because, I don't know, everyone's too busy asking can we instead of should we. Anyway, they start trusting more day-to-day operations to the synths as their processing power rises in complexity. As those of you who have played Fallout 3 and 4 will know, not all human-like synths take kindly to their treatment, so they ran away. And how does the Institute deal with that? Coursers. Synths designed to hunt synths. Oh, and don't forget that the human synths are so advanced that they can be programmed to infiltrate and completely replace high-ranking officials in every facet of society, including the Brotherhood of Steel. Okay, they have synth maids, synth secret police.
People you are after are the people you depend on.
Synth military and synth spies.
Cook your meals. Call your trash.
Synth political leaders.
We guard you while you sleep. Not pause.
The synths that the Institute have created have displayed a capacity for self-actualization, have integrated themselves into every facet of life in the Commonwealth, and are faster, smarter, and in every conceivable way better than actual humans. The Institute trusts that they can control the synths, but what happens if they're wrong? What happens if the Institute loses control? What happens when the Institute trusts the synths too much? Sure, they have the factory reset codes for emergencies, but what about when the Institute decides,
Fuck it. I don't want to have an entire human being waste their day overseeing robot manufacturing. Let's just have a synth do it. What happens when it's no longer a person ordering around the coursers, but another synth? The Synth Retention Bureau lead strategist synth. And what happens when this group of intelligent individuals that's been hunted, oppressed, and enslaved by humans for their entire existence decides collectively that enough is enough? That it ends today. And humans, particularly the pasty, doughy nerds at the Institute, are no match for a robot army, especially ones trained in espionage, infiltration, psychological warfare, and cleaning toilets. Best case scenario, all humans become complacent, willing slaves to a vast robot army incapable of uprising or wiping their own asses. But when has anything in the Fallout universe been a best case scenario? I mean, they've already had one apocalypse already. What's one more? I'd like to add that Stephen Hawking, one of the smartest humans of our generation, considers the exponential growth of artificial intelligence to be one of the single greatest threats to humanity. Like in real life, not some fantasy novel. The Institute has created the single greatest threat to humanity, and they are casually regulating it to cleaning floors and doing whatever this guy's doing. Stuff. Important stuff, I bet. Anyway, what do you think? Has the Institute created the instrument of their own destruction and demise, or am I just some old fuddy-duddy who's against technology, darn you kids with your smartwatches?